we'll get started with our webinar today, where we're going to be discussing employing practical information for improved profitability. And then, like always, our sessions are going to be recorded. If you have any questions, please submit those in our Q&A chat, or you can email those in to info@ninjaag.com. Our topic is employing practical information for improved profitability, and we have some special guests on here. Today we have Matt Westerhouse with Heartland Soil Services, and we also have Pete Flax, who works as a grower with Flax Farms and works closely with Heartland Soil Services as well. And so we're going to discuss a little bit about their experiences, as well as over the last couple seasons and using Ninja Ag and our methods that we use. Thank you, Matt and Pete, for coming on today. We really appreciate it. And we'll kind of get started with you, Matt, this morning. Can you describe and discuss a little bit kind of your role and what you do at Heartland Soil Services, but also as well as your experiences in utilizing our methods these last couple of seasons?
Yep, I'm with Heartland Soil Services. I've been here for a little over 3 years. I came on to the company to build out a new department within the company, and that revolves all around crop sensing equipment and methodologies. What we've been implementing are technologies that allow us to remotely get a sense of what's going on in the field, and the way we've been able to do that is on our nitrogen management side is through Ninja Ag. We utilize various tools and have partnerships with imagery companies, irrigation management tools, very similar relationships than the one we have with Ninja Ag. And I think as COVID has impacted all of our operations, being able to utilize remote technologies like this has really helped us continue to do business in the way we've been used to, and has been a good solution for tackling some of these difficulties that COVID brought. So that's, I guess, a little bit about me, and I'll pass it on here at this point.
Thank you, Matt. Pete, can you talk a little bit, discuss about very similar about kind of your role and as a grower and working with Heartland these last couple seasons and utilizing these methods that we use at Ninja Ag?
Yes, so I'm a farmer in western Kansas. Basically, the last couple of years, we've been looking at ways to save on fertilizer on wheat. Wheat, up till this point, has been very low in price and been a very tough crop for us to be profitable on. So we were looking at options on ways that we could increase the profitability of our farm and still put wheat into a rotation, because it's very beneficial to have wheat in our rotation to increase our sorghum yields, planting no-till into it the following year. So we, John West with Terravion had come to me a couple of years ago with some imagery, and we had used the imagery for other things, and then he had told me about the enrich strips, and he got me got me together with Matt, who was basically in charge of doing the imagery. I was purchasing the imagery from him, and in turn, Matt goes to Ninja Ag for the recommendations. And on our farm, we found it very very profitable, really boosted the profitability of our farm by feeding the plant only when it needs it or shows that it needs nitrogen. So it's been a very, very easy process for us. It's saved us a lot of money on the farm. The process of putting the enriched strips out is a very easy process. My 16-year-old son runs the sprayer. So go out across the fields, and we'll use Climate Field View for our mapping platform. We'll pick a couple of spots out in the field where we'll apply about 100 pounds of nitrogen in an acre or two grid, and then we'll go to a different spot in the field or a different soil type, whatever we're faced in that field. And it's easy enough to apply that my 16-year-old son can do this. It takes him an afternoon to run across 3,000 acres of wheat to put strips on. And what we found in the past is that a lot of the fields that show on a soil sample that they need nitrogen, the plant doesn't actually respond to it. So 2 years ago on like 2,500 acres of wheat, where we normally would have applied 100 pounds of nitrogen, some of those fields only got 25 pounds applied to them. And we were still able, and I wouldn't believe this if it didn't happen to me, we were still able to cut some 70 and 80 bushel wheat off of 25 pounds of applied nitrogen. And that was applied at planting. So the process has worked very well for us. Ninja Ag has been very, very good about making recommendations on the enriched strips that were very true to what the predicted yields were. Their predicted yields were very close, and that's what's impressed me most about this deal. Them telling me if you don't put the nitrogen down, you may make 48 bushels an acre, and if you do put the nitrogen down and you put down 40 pounds, you may get 62 bushels an acre. And it's very, very impressive how close they are on their recommendations. So that's one thing that it has blown my mind on this whole deal. I just can't believe that they get that close. And Dr. Arnold has really worked well to get the recommendations where they need to be to make it profitable.
Well, thank you, Pete. When you talked about a little bit on as easy it is to get out. And you mentioned that a little bit. So what you said is that you're able to basically put out multiple strips in an afternoon across, what was that, 3,000 acres?
Yeah, my son left here at 8 o'clock in the morning with a R4030 John Deere sprayer with 750 gallons of fertilizer in it, and basically, as quick as he could get to the field, unfold the booms, run a little pass across the field, because you're not spending more than 10 minutes in a field, and that would be pushing it. If we're going to cross a half section, he's literally going to drive from one end of that field to the other. He's going to kick the booms on in a couple of spots going across that field. When he gets to the other side, he's going to fold up the booms and he's going to head to the next field. He put 75 miles on that sprayer and was home by 2 o'clock that afternoon, and that day he had done like 2,500 acres of application, putting the enriched strips out, which obviously was 10 acres that he sprayed, but it was very easy to do, and actually, he knows the fields, and it's just really simple to apply those strips.
Now, what was your initial thoughts when you were working, when you first saw that enriched strip show up? What exactly did you see, or what exactly did you do after those strips were showing up?
The first thing you do when the strips show up is you panic. The first time you do this, you panic. All of my neighbors were out, and I'm a fairly aggressive farmer in the area. So if there's going to be something that's going to be done, I'm going to be the guy that's going to get it done timely. Well, all the neighbors had went out. They had applied 70 to 80 pounds of nitrogen on their wheat already in January, and here we are in the late into March, and I've gotten 25 pounds of fertilizer on my wheat that I put down with the drill at planting. So the strips are starting to show up, and they're not, at first with the imagery, a lot of times you can't even tell the strips are showing up. So when we're flying the airplanes over and we're using the NDVI cameras, a lot of times you visibly can't see the strips show up yet, and so you really can't tell a lot of difference in it when the plane's flying. Now, when you visibly see that when you're driving down the road, we got what we call our 65-mile-an-hour strips, and we try to put a strip by a drive-in by every field. So when he pulls in to the field, we're going to unfold the booms, and we're going to make our 65-mile-an-hour strip right by that. And that's when you're driving by 65 miles an hour. If that strip sticks out, you better get your butt in gear. So, and when those strips stick out, the first year I panicked. I really thought I was behind the 8 ball. Dr. Arnold kept telling me, no, you're fine. Things are going to work out okay. And they did. But it's definitely a change because at that point, that wheat's needing the fertilizer. And, it was just a little different at the start. Now I'm more relaxed about it. When I see the strips sticking out, I know it's just time to start making the plan. We're going to do something in the next week and a half or so on that strip to start bringing that field up to the fertility it needs.
Yeah, those 65-mile-an-hour strips, those are some of my favorites.
Yeah.
Matt, kind of going off of this, Matt, how are you able to have that discussion, and kind of ease that grower fear when it comes to adopting maybe a new methodology or technology like Ninja Ag?
Yeah, it's something that we hit frequently when we start talking about new technologies and new methodologies to achieve a more accurate result. And it's something that we work through every year. A lot of times we mix, I recommend mixing in some of your practices that you're used to with these new practices, and don't feel like as a producer that you have to just jump in whole hog into this. It's definitely okay to prove it to yourself and to get your feet wet and compare it to some other practices. I encourage that. I think that's the best way to build trust in a system. And it's usually one of the easiest ways to manage a new system as well is to take a portion of your acres and give it a try, as opposed to throwing everything in blind and panicking when you see things that you aren't used to normally seeing. So that's typically my approach, and I'd say kind of going back a step when Pete was talking about how easy it is to implement the enriched strips from my point of view. It's also very simple and spend about the same amount of time in the field to gather than the ground truth data using a green seeker device. 10 minutes in a field on a four-wheeler, low impact. You're not creating any disturbance or damage into the field as you're running through it and collecting that data. So the workflow is very similar on our end as a service provider then at that point as well. It's very timely. It's as opposed to the traditional way of doing it, taking deep nitrate samples down to 24 inches. And it's a lot more laborious task and time consuming, albeit it's not as time consuming as a 2.5 acre grid or something. But those are things that we all utilize, all different methodologies that we utilize here at Heartland. But the amount of acres that we're able to get over with the airplane and then run it through your calculators is, you just can't do it with any other methodology.
Hey, Matt, this is Jerry May.
Hey, Jerry.
What was a turning point where you saw the value of the green seeker and the enriched strips and with those methods to deliver? What was a turning point where you saw where this really works?
Definitely discussions with Pete. Really, I think going into it, I knew that 3 years ago, I guess when I came on at Heartland, that develop and bring solutions like yours to our customer base. I knew imagery could do this. I also knew that there's a lot of misconceptions about how to do it and how to do it right. And there's people that say this is the right way to do it, but there wasn't a lot of science behind it. They're using sensors and methods that weren't ground truth to try and put as little effort into the process as possible, while still trying to deliver a usable result. And so I think Pete's experience, but also when we combine it with the knowledge that the team at Ninja Ag and just their experience in this field, I mean that right there meant a lot. Meeting Dr. Arnold down at Info Ag talking about this and him introducing it to me, and just knowing his track record and knowing about him and what he's done in academia around this. I mean, that was really a turning point. I would say that is the turning point for me, knowing that it's not just a Silicon Valley company with an idea and not enough understanding in the methodology and in the process to really give you a valuable end result. So knowing that Ninja Ag is not that, and knowing that they're where they're coming from and the expertise they're delivering, and that really did it for me.
We're just down home guys. We're just trying to help farmers out. And I'm sure you've got some interactions with people that disagree with our methodology. Do you run into any of them? And of course, Pete, he does the enriched strips and he loves them. Is there any traction being gained with this?
Yeah, I mean, we're bringing on new customers into this, so absolutely, there's traction. And there are producers that are, they see a challenge or they see something wrong with it, and it's not for them, and that's okay too. I mean, I'm not here to push anybody into something they don't want to do, to spend money in a different way than they're used to. I think at the end of the day, you're going to be more efficient with this, and to give you some new knowledge that you may not have had before. I think Pete and I have discussed it in the past, but I know having those yield forecasts that are pretty accurate can really help your marketing decisions early on and throughout the season. I think you can be a more adaptive producer by having this information at your disposal. That really hits our motto at Heartland. I mean, if you don't, unless you test, it's just a guess is our tagline, and that comes true with this service as well. You are taking a measurement, you are testing, that crop for that estimated nitrogen rate, and without that information, you are more or less guessing, or you're not making as informed decisions. So we do have some kickback, but I think there's a lot of pros to this service as well. And sure, I mean, there be producers that they don't feel like they have the equipment or the ability to record the data as necessary, but there's tools out here that can help you, and we can help solve those problems with you. There's a lot of third-party data collection devices these days that don't require the latest and greatest machinery to record that information and create something usable out of it. So sometimes there's a step or two needed to get the operator up to snuff to collect this data, but it's nothing that's insurmountable by any means.
And you kind of mentioned a little bit on that, the marketing and different things like that. Pete, are you, now that you've kind of been successful with this, do you utilize that mid-season information as a part of your marketing decisions?
Yes. So since we've started this program, we've added a lot of on-farm storage, and we're adding more. So we're going to have about 450,000 bushels of on-farm storage. And for me, it's important to know where these bushels are going to come from and where these bushels are going to go to be profitable. So when I'm talking to my marketing guy, the first thing he's always asking me is, so what does your wheat look like? What do you think your yields are? Well, when we start getting into March and April, and I'm starting to get these figures in from Ninja Ag that are saying, okay, so your wheat, if you don't fertilize, you're going to have a profit or a potential of 45. If you do, you may have a potential of 65 bushels. Then we're going to start marketing a percentage of that wheat, so we have some, if there's any profitability, be locked in early on. So we're going to use those figures. And the first year I did not use those figures. The very first year I did this, I got about 2/3 of the way through putting the extra nitrogen on the recommendations, and a hailstorm moved through, and I just stopped. And I didn't finish the other a third of my wheat. And that's what actually sold me on the program. Was if I would have probably finished the entire thing, I probably would have never been sold on the program. But that's when I noticed, what Brian had told me the yields would be or predicted to be. He was very close. So from then going forward, we started using that a little more on the marketing tool, because it's like, I thought the guy was full of crap at the start. Maybe he does know something that I don't know. So we use some of his marketing or some of his expertise on the yield side to help us on the marketing side, and it definitely has put my farm in a lot better position than it was even 4 years ago.
Well, that's great to hear. Is there any other comments or anything else that Pete or Matt that you'd like to share with us today?
For my part of it, like Matt said, maybe go on a smaller acreage. I'm not a smaller acreage guy. I'm all in. When I do something, I'm all in. And the first year I was all in, and I think not getting the acres covered is what sold me on it that year. It is not hard to cover the acres. We're streaming on this fertilizer, so when we're going in the late part of March, the first part, or maybe even the middle part of April, and streaming this fertilizer on, those are things we can do when the wind's blowing, because we're not out there with a nozzle trying to spray this stuff on. So we're streaming this fertilizer on, and it doesn't take long to do it. You've got the calculations there. You know how much nitrogen you need to put on. If we have to have a portable setup somewhere to increase the efficiency of the sprayer, that's it's all done ahead of time. So once you know what you need to put on and where you need to put it on and when you need to put it on, it clicks off pretty fast.
Pete, this is Jerry May again. How easy was it to streamline? So you got the maps and everything of showing you kind of the variable rate map that you're going to implement on each field. How easy was it to streamline that shapefile into your rig, and how did your rig perform variable rating that nitrogen from a low rate to a high rate?
There was absolutely no problem. Matt had all that taken care of for me, so it was plug and play for me. We put shape files in. It was set up. The sprayer going across the field with the stream tips we use, you can run from, as long as you're keeping the nozzles open, which is going to be 10 to 15 pounds of pressure, and then you can go all the way up to 80 or 90 pounds of pressure. It's not going to change anything that's out of the streams. It's just going to be the amount that's coming out of we're using like a 8-hole orifice to stream these out. And, going across the field, we're running across the field 18 to 20 miles an hour with this thing. So we're clipping the acres off. And in fact, last year, I keep talking about my 16-year-old son. He actually applied quite a bit of fertilizer last year. I mean, it was a matter of getting there and pulling up the fields, and we had the portable set there, and it was a good experience for him to run the sprayer, and he enjoyed doing it, and it gave him experience doing to run the sprayer. that's not that critical of an application. There's nothing harmful getting sprayed out of the sprayer. We're not putting any chemicals in. And but he gained some valuable time on the sprayer, and it just makes the program just really easy to apply.
Great, great. I know there was some feedback from us that you know, some of these rigs couldn't variable rate from a very low rate to a high rate, and I think that answers that. They very well can fairly easily.
Yeah, there's a wide range, and you're going to know. I mean, if you're looking at the maps, you're going to know your maximum rate. You're going to know your minimum rate right off the start anyway. So, you know, if we need to, our sprayer's on 15-inch spacing, and if we're not going to run a real high rate of fertilizer on that field, we're going to close that down to 30-inch spacing with our nozzles. And then if we're running a little bit lower rate, and the high rate's not going to get that high, we're going to cut those nozzles in half. The next field we get to it, we know we're going to have to increase we're going to have to go up to 30 gallons. We're going to turn all the nozzles on, and then we're going to be able to catch that range from, 5 to 30 gallons with no problem.
Yep. Thank you.
I've got a couple things to add. I don't know who all we have in the audience today, but I'd imagine there's probably a fair mix of producers and ag business individuals. And I mean, from my point of view, part of my job is to kind of weed through the technologies and find services that we want to partner with. And there's several things there's several pieces of criteria that I'm looking at and looking for in companies to work with. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed about this tool and about Ninja Ag in general is that it's very flexible, and they're very flexible as far as data and inputs. So when for some of you who may or may not know, the company we utilize for the imagery, when Pete started this, Travion has since declared bankruptcy, and I don't think they exist at all anymore, actually. And so we've moved over to last year we moved over to a different service provider to capture that image, and being able to pivot and utilize different sources of information is really beneficial, and it also helps us create more value around that image, or that data input that we're being, we're only paying for that image once, and we're using it in multiple ways, and I think that's very beneficial. And the other point that I'd like to make is I put a lot into Ninja Ag, and that the fact that they're giving you information and it's unbiased information. Our companies line up straight on in that aspect. We're not trying to sell you a product based off of this information, right? So, if this came from somewhere else, some other company that maybe had a fertilizer product, and they were also providing the information on where and how much you need to apply, I just put my farmer hat on. I'd question that a little more than if it's coming from a third party unbiased opinion. And I think that's led to the success of both of our companies, that we've maintained that unbiased, and that we're just spitting it out as plain and simple. This is what the data is telling us. This is what we're thinking you need, and you're free to use whatever product you'd like.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Pete. Jeremy, Courtney, is there anything else that you have for these guys today?
I think I'm good. Jerry May?
No, I don't think so. They covered about from everything from step one to Pete having on-farm storage, which is becoming a big issue. So yeah, we went from start to finish.
Matt and Pete, you provided phenomenal information today and you're paving the way for many, many others in the industry. And we really appreciate you and everything that you're doing and your leadership.
Thank you guys very much. Terrific job.
Yes, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you both. If anybody has any questions, we'll definitely be glad to answer those here. But here's my contact information in case there's some questions that didn't get covered today. You can definitely send those to me, and we'll be able to get in contact with Matt or Pete to be able to get those answers if you have something for them that didn't get discussed today.